Hello everyone, long time no see. I'm Itzo. Today we're going to be going over string.format. Now string.format is something that is not really commonly used or I see used a lot, but it is something that has to do with formatting strings so you don't have a concatenating mess, and it's very useful if you want some custom like text or label sort of format. Like if you have a clock, you obviously want the colon in the middle of the seconds and the minutes. Or if you have a health bar, you want a slash and you don't want it to go to so many decimals, then this is a good um, way to use string.format, and it is very nice to use. And once you learn this ability, you will also be able to use it in other programming languages, which is usually the norm when displaying any sort of other data type like numbers. You would have to use a sort of formatting function, or well, it's integrated into their prints. But for us, we have the luxury of being able to concatenate numbers, but of course, this is still good knowledge to have, and it does come in handy when you're trying to format a certain way, especially when you're working around with GUI a lot. With that out of the way, we can get started. So, for this video, I'm just gonna add normal script and service script service, and I'm just gonna tell you what like really is in a string.format. So, of course, for string.format, we're obviously going to have a string as the first argument. That is for every single string function, right? So let's put this here, and to make it easy to read, let's just have the string being modified called my string. Let's name it, or let's have it like that. Some normal quotes, and then there. Now, before I go over what the second argument is going to be, I need to tell you like how this string is going to be affected. Okay, so what this string is going to do is it's just going to be a normal string, but any sort of like certain sequence it has is gonna be replaced by any of the other arguments that are in it. Okay, I'll tell you what I mean. So the sequence for it to like activate, or for it to be as like a reservoir to have any of the other values to be in it, is it has to start with percentage sign. Now this percentage sign is usually followed by a specifier. For specifiers, there are many sort of different ways or different characters that represent a category of something. So for numbers that are in strings, there's lots of like different ones. Like it could be in a scientific notation with E. It could have decimals. It could be like a float. It could be an integer. It could just be a normal digits. It could be anything. So really, this specifier just tells us what we want to be affected, or what we want to replace it with. Okay, so now that we have that, let's go to the left, and actually no, let's just test it out. Okay, so let's say I want to say, hi, my name is Jacob. Alright, so if I have this, and let me print this real quick so you can see what it actually says. If I run this, it's just gonna be normal, right? It's just gonna say, hi, my name is Jacob. If we go to the output, it's just gonna be that. Nothing special. Now, where string.format comes in is, let's say instead of Jacob, let's say I want to have something specific, right? I could do, or I could detect, or sort of like categorize what we want. So let's say I want a string to be replaced here. I could do percentage sign s, and this should represent any sort of string that goes in it. So let's say if I have a second argument, that second argument is gonna go into this percentage sign. So let's add Jacob here. If you run this, it's gonna run exactly the same. Now let's say we want to add another name, like hi, my name is Jacob. I am so many years old. Now with this, we can add another argument, and that argument is gonna be placed in the second one. So if we add something like 15, we can hit run here, and it should run regularly. Hi, my name is Jacob. I am 15 years old. Now, of course, you might be saying, oh, why can't I just concatenate this? Wouldn't that make sense? Like, yes, this might be convenient, but I can just sort of replicate this behavior with just doing something like this. Hi, my name is, and then you could put Jacob or whatever, like that. But the real way string.format shines is the sort of functionality you have with it. So this functionality, I mean, is, let's say you want to round to a certain number. Like, let's say this is going to cost $100.00, right? If I have this normally, if I want to if I just have this normally, it's gonna run, right? But if I want to if I want to input a certain variable into it, we can use this with string.format. So as you know from our specifiers, we can categorize them to what we want to be represented into them. So if we want a float or decimal to be in it, we can write %f or %d for digits, and f for floats, of course. So what we can do is we can represent this number with an f, and usually people use f for numbers like these. But let's say now we want to say it costs 125.999 or 99988, right? This, of course, it doesn't make sense. There can't be a third decimal place. And look at this. It adds these numbers that we don't want, and it looks disgusting, right? This is not how a $sign is supposed to be formatted. But going back to the sort of sequence string.format uses, there is another sort of thing you can add to it that is, it can be for strings too, but it's also for digits, and this is the precision section. So if we add a period, and the period represents just where the decimal point cuts off, and the sort of numbers and how many digits it can go what is the limits of how many digits it has, we can add that, and we can represent our money. So if we add period here and then add 2, this is gonna go to 2 decimal places. So if we run this, it should help our problem. 125.99. And if we have something if we don't have it filled all the way, it's gonna fill that space for us, and it's gonna pull 0.00. And that's the cool thing about it. And as I said, this also works with strings. The way this works is it just limits how many characters is going to be used. So if you have let's say a text label, and you wanted to cut off, or you don't want to have that many characters or something, you can have you can use this precision section and limit the amount of characters. So for example, if I do this is limited, and I put %s, and I add something like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, it's gonna work normally. But if I add something like 0.3, it's gonna limit to just 3 characters. and that's the cool thing about it. Now, of course, this in itself is already pretty cool, but let's say this is more onto like of course, this is more onto formatting, and the way that works is, let's say you have multiple things, like multiple lines, and you want them all to be centered. Like, this is what I mean. Like, let's say we have A is equal to 130, B is equal to 250, C is equal to 175, is equal, let's do back, cat, dog. And you see how all these numbers are messed up? What string.format can help us do is they can help us pad all these like this. And this comes in useful especially when representing information or data. And the way we do this is we don't use this for precision, of course, as we said earlier. This is just for limiting the amount of characters, or limiting the amount of decimal places a certain string or integer, or not integer, floats can go to. What we really need is another section, and this section is called flag and width. Now flag is just like what we want this space to be filled with. If we want it to be filled with spaces, we use a certain flag. If we want it to be filled with zeros, we put a certain flag. If we want it to be let's say if we want it to be the opposite way and have the right filled with spaces, we do that. The width is the amount of spaces that will be padded to. So if you have like some like extremely long number, these could only go so far. That is what the width tells it to do. Of course, you can have it be some like long number, but usually you want to stick to something that is averaged out, I guess. So the way we can do this is, let's say we want to add zeros to something. I haven't found a use case for this, but let's say we do. Okay, so let's say let's just use what is it called? A mile indicator, I guess. And let's put an integer, of course, because miles, I mean, it can be decimals, but it's not going to be represented in decimals in the car. So let's add an integer. And for our flag, as I said, this is what we want the string.format to be filled with. So let's say we want it to be filled with zeros, and let's say we want it to be 12. We want it to be like the whole integer. We want it to have at most 12 characters. So if we put this and add something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and run this, it should have how many zeros? It should have 8 zeros. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then we have our 4 numbers, right? And that makes sense. 8 plus 4 is 12, and that is our width specified. Now, of course, well, what if you don't want zeros? What if you want something else? Or what if you want spaces? You can do that. You can do it, I think, without anything. It should just fill it up with spaces. And as I said before, if you want it to be space to the right, you can add a minus sign. And this should help with that. It doesn't show here. I mean, it does show if you like underline it, but it's there. And then there's just a lot of cool stuff you can do with string.format. And I'll actually go into a special case that can be helpful, and that is somewhat practical to game development, because of course what I said is mostly trivial. So let's go into something practical. So let's say we want to have our health displayed, right? So let's say our health is whatever, 75, and our max health, whoops, is 100. Let's have our indication, and let's do it the normal way. The normal way would just be do something like health, and then we have a slash, and then we have max health, and we can print this. So this is how you normally do it. 75 over 100 looks perfectly fine, but of course Roblox is not perfect. There's gonna be some floating point errors, and you're gonna have something like 0002 or something, and this is gonna look a bit too many zeros. This is not gonna look very pretty, and you'll see in a bit. You see how much space this covers, and you would have this represented in some sort of GUI. If that GUI isn't capable of handling that much characters, it's not gonna go very well for you. So what we can do is, of course, some people use math.round, but we can have it much more easier and have it much more, let's say, much easier for other people to edit our code with, and that is to use string.format. So as I said before, our first string is going to be what's going to be modified, so we can just add like health formats. I'm not sure with, yeah, it's like that. And of course we want to encapsulate, or we choose what we want to encapsulate in our string. So in my case, let's say I want to have integer. I could just do %i space %i. Now this I can oh, and cool trick, instead of doing string.format and doing all this, if it's like this, you can just do format like this. It's integrated into any sort of string. They all have these methods into them. And then with that, whoops, that's completely wrong. If we have that, we can add our health, and then by a comma, this max health will go to the second integer. And if we run this, it's gonna look just as good. And when doing this, you remove any sort of anonymous strings you have. And I'm, as a saying, or as some people usually say, is when you have magic strings or anonymous or magic magic numbers too, you usually want to have those in variables or have them in comments so other people know like what that code really does. And with this, we know, oh, this %i slash %i is how the health is going to be represented. And let's say we still want the decimals in it. Let's say the players are stingy like that. We can add precision to it. So let's change these to floats, and let's have these have a precision of 2. And it's going to change it beautifully like this. And no matter what we put, if we add so many decimals, it's not going to change a thing. Or it's going to limit it, of course. And it's going to look very nice, very pretty, and it's easy to change. Let's say I want like 5 spaces on each side. I could add that. And it's just going to look fine. Or actually, if I want, let's say I want these spaces, or let's say I want the numbers to be in the middle right here, and I want this what is it, this width to stay the same. We can add our padding to it instead. So let's just remove all these spaces, and let's add our padding. Let's say our padding should be 5 numbers, so let's add 5 numbers on both. And by itself, I'm pretty sure the spaces are going to be on the left. So that's fine for this one, but for this one it's not. So we can add a negative sign here to be our flag. And that's gonna look good. Oh, I'm pretty sure these are already like 5 characters. So let's add, what, like 10? Yeah. And that does exactly what we wanted to do. And that slash is still gonna be in the middle no matter what. Let's say I have that. That's not gonna be very logical, but let's say we have that. The slash is still gonna be in the middle. So yeah, as we know, string.format very, very useful for GUI. Another thing I forgot to mention is that, let's say I want something to be represented in like scientific notation. I can do that with string.format without implementing any sort of like custom function. So let's say I want 1, 2, 3, 4 represented in scientific notation. I could just do %e and I'd basically be on my way. I don't have to do anything else. It's already did for me. And I'm pretty sure position also works. So as you see, there's like, what, like 3 zeros there, and that looks kind of ugly. We can cut that out and just limit it to do 2 decimals. And sometimes numbers get so big that this scientific notation just comes out. And the way we can avoid that is by using string.format and having it be put in to a float specifier. Now this comes really in handy, and you don't really use it often, but it is something that is good to know.